The medical station floated in the darkness of space like a white jewel. Its name was Mercy's Gate, and for 15 years it had been a place of healing. Ships came from every corner of the galaxy to dock here. Inside its walls, war did not exist. Pain ended here. Death was fought here, and usually death lost. Commander Kyle Morrison walked through the main corridor. His boots made soft sounds on the clean floor. Through the windows he could see stars scattered across the black like diamonds. He'd been station commander for 3 years now, and he loved every moment of it. This place saved lives. What could be better than that? He passed by the main medical bay. Inside, doctors and nurses moved between beds. Some were human. Most were not. There were tall, thin Volnari with their insect-like bodies. There were the peaceful Tanari who looked almost like walking plants. There were dozens of other species, all working together, all healing together. Dr. Linda Hayes was checking on a patient. The Volnari miner had been caught in a radiation leak 3 days ago. His shell had been turning gray, his insides burning from the poisonous energy. But Linda had worked on him for hours. She'd used treatments that most alien doctors didn't know about. Human medicine was different. Humans came from a dangerous world, so they'd learned to be creative. Now the miner's shell was turning its natural green color again. He would live. The Volnari clicked his mandibles at her. In his language, he was saying thank you over and over. Linda smiled and patted his shoulder gently. She didn't need to understand the words. She knew what he meant. In another part of the station, Nurse Jacob Williams was preparing an operating room. He moved fast but careful, setting out instruments and checking machines. Everything had to be perfect. Lives depended on it. He'd been a nurse for 8 years, and before that he'd worked in emergency rooms on Earth. Nothing here scared him anymore. He'd seen worse. Dr. Nathan Pierce came in, already washing his hands. He was the senior surgeon on the station. His hair was going gray at the temples, and his hands had the steadiness that came from thousands of surgeries. Tonight they had 3 patients coming in. A mining accident on the nearby asteroid belt. Explosions in space were never good. People got hurt bad. Ready? Nathan asked. Always, Jacob replied. They worked well together. They'd saved dozens of lives as a team. Maybe hundreds. Nathan didn't keep count. Every life was important. Every life was worth fighting for. In the cafeteria, Nurse Amy Cooper was taking a break. She sat with other staff members drinking something that was supposed to taste like coffee, but didn't quite make it. She didn't mind. After 12 hours on shift, anything with caffeine was good. She talked with a Thanari orderly about their patients. She laughed at a joke from one of the human technicians. Life on the station was good. Down in engineering, Greg Palmer was fixing a coolant line. He was covered in grease and sweat, but he was smiling. He liked fixing things, making things work, keeping the station running. His crew worked around him, all of them focused on their tasks. The station was old, but they kept it running smooth. They were proud of that. Nobody knew that death was coming toward them through the darkness. The Kryn Collective War Fleet moved through space like sharks through water. 53 ships all armed, all ready for battle. They'd come from their defeat 3 systems away. Their warriors were angry. Their war queen was furious. She wanted revenge, and she wanted it now. The war queen sat in her command throne on the flagship. Her mandibles clicked as she studied the tactical display. Mercy's Gate was perfect. It was famous. It was important. And it was weak. The intelligence report said it had almost no defenses. Just a medical station, easy prey. The war queen didn't know much about humans. Her intelligence officers had told her they were soft. They were peaceful. They ran hospitals and helped others. They would surrender quickly or die quickly. Either was fine with her. She didn't know that humans came from Earth. She didn't know that Earth was classified as a death world by every major galactic database. She didn't know that every single thing on Earth tried to kill anything else on Earth. The weather, the animals, the plants, the diseases, everything. She didn't know that humans had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being more stubborn, more vicious, and more dangerous than anything else on their planet. She didn't know that humans had a saying, "Don't mess with someone who chose to save lives. They know exactly where all the important parts are." She was about to learn. The Kryn fleet approached Mercy's Gate from the dark side where sensors were weakest. They moved in perfect formation. They'd done this before. They were good at it. Their weapons charged. their boarding pods prepared. Their warriors put on their armor and checked their rifles. On the station, Kyle Morrison was finishing his evening reports. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. The night shift had started an hour ago. Some staff were sleeping. Some were working. Some were eating or relaxing. It was just another night on Mercy's Gate. In the surgical suite, Nathan Pierce was opening up his patient. The miner had a piece of metal lodged near his spine. Alien anatomy, but Nathan had studied. He knew what he was doing. Jacob handed him instruments without being asked. They worked like they shared one mind. Linda Hayes was in her quarters, finally off shift. She'd just gotten out of the shower and was thinking about sleep. Real sleep for maybe 6 hours if she was lucky. Tomorrow would be busy again. Tomorrow was always busy. Amy Cooper was walking through the pediatric ward. She liked checking on the kids before she went home. There were only 5 right now. A young Thanari with a broken bone. 2 Volnari siblings recovering from fever. A human girl who'd been in a shuttle accident. A small creature from a species Amy couldn't pronounce but who was very sweet. She smiled at them all. They were sleeping or resting. They were safe. They were healing. Greg Palmer finished his repairs and headed to the mess hall. He was hungry, and the night shift cook made pretty good food. 4 station food anyway. He was thinking about getting some sleep after eating. Maybe watching a movie first. The Kryn fleet stopped just outside weapons range. They waited. They wanted all their ships in position. They wanted this to be perfect. They wanted to hurt this station badly. They wanted the galaxy to see what happened when you got in the way of the Kryn collective. The War Queen gave the order. 53 ships opened fire at once. The first plasma torpedoes hit Mercy's Gate's shields. The shields were designed to stop space dust and radiation. They were not designed to stop military weapons. They held for maybe 3 seconds. Then they collapsed like breaking glass. The next torpedoes hit the hull directly. Metal exploded. Atmosphere vented into space. Alarms started screaming on every deck. Red lights flashed. People started running. Kyle Morrison was thrown across his office. His coffee mug shattered on the floor. For 1 second, he just lay there confused. Then his training kicked in. He grabbed his communicator and started shouting orders. All hands to battle stations. Medical staff, start emergency evacuations. Security teams, arm yourselves and defend the civilians. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. They had maybe 40 security guards. The station had 2 defense turrets designed to scare off pirates. Mercy's Gate wasn't a warship. It was a hospital. They were all going to die here. In the surgical suite, the lights flickered. Nathan Pierce didn't even look up. Jacob clamped that artery. Someone get me more light. A young orderly ran in. Doctor, we're under attack. We have to evacuate. Then evacuate, Nathan said calmly. His hands didn't shake. I've got a patient on my table. I'm not leaving him. Jacob stayed too. So did the anesthesiologist. They had a job to do. The Kryn boarding pods launched. They flew through space and attached to the hull like metal parasites. Cutting torches flared bright. They started burning through the doors. Amy Cooper heard the explosions. She was still in the pediatric ward. She looked at the sleeping children and made a decision. She grabbed the comm unit. This is Nurse Cooper in pediatrics. I need evacuation teams here now. We've got 5 kids who can't move on their own. Then she started getting the children ready. She was calm. She was professional. Inside, she was terrified. But the kids didn't need to see that. The first Kryn warriors burst through a breach in Corridor 9. They expected fear. They expected surrender. They were warriors of the collective. They'd conquered planets. What they got was Greg Palmer with a plasma cutter in his hands and murder in his eyes. He'd just heard that the first torpedo had hit the pediatric wing's outer section. There had been kids there. The Kryn didn't know it yet. But they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. They'd hurt children in front of humans. The alarm system screamed through every corridor of Mercy's Gate. Red emergency lights painted everything in blood colors. People ran in every direction. Some toward the escape pods. Some toward their stations. Some just ran because running felt safer than standing still. Kyle Morrison pulled himself up from the floor of his office. His head was bleeding from where he'd hit the wall. He didn't care. He wiped the blood from his eyes and ran toward the command center. His second officer was already there, trying to get reports from all sections of the station. What's our status? Kyle demanded. Shields are gone. Hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 9. We've got fires in 3 sections. Main power is holding, but backup systems are damaged. The officer's voice was steady, but his hands shook. Sir, sensors show 53 hostile ships out there. We count 40 boarding pods attached to our hull. Kyle felt his stomach drop. 53 ships. They were so dead. Get the civilians to the escape pods. All non-essential personnel evacuate now. Medical staff, save who you can and then get out. Sir, we only have pods for maybe half our population. Kyle closed his eyes for just a moment. Then we defend the people until the rest can evacuate. Get our security teams into position. Break out the weapons locker. The weapons locker had 30 rifles and some pistols, against an army of Kryn warriors with military-grade equipment. It was a joke, but it was all they had. In the medical bay, Linda Hayes heard the evacuation order. She looked at her patients. There were 23 beings in this ward alone. Some could walk, some couldn't. Some were attached to machines that were keeping them alive. Start moving the ones who can walk, she told her staff. Priority to the mobile patients. Get them to the pods. A Thanari nurse looked at the patients on life support. What about them? Linda didn't answer right away. She couldn't. If they unplugged those machines, those patients would die in minutes. But if they didn't evacuate, the Kryn would kill them anyway. And the nurses. And Linda. We moved them with the machines, Linda finally said. There are portable power units in storage. Hook them up. We're not leaving anyone behind. It was impossible. They didn't have enough time. They didn't have enough hands. But Linda had learned a long time ago that impossible just meant you had to work harder. She'd been an emergency room doctor in Chicago before coming to space. She'd done impossible things before. The Kryn cutting torches finished their work on the first breach. The door fell inward with a crash of metal. 6 Kryn warriors pushed through, their rifles up and ready. They were big, nearly 7 feet tall, with tough exoskeletons that could stop most small arms fire. Their mandibles clicked as they communicated with each other in their own language. They found themselves in a storage corridor. Empty. Good. They moved forward in formation, checking corners like they'd been trained. They were professionals. They'd done this on a dozen worlds. They turned the corner and ran straight into Greg Palmer and his engineering crew. Greg had a plasma cutter. His friend Danny had a welding torch. Another guy named Chris had a heavy wrench that looked like it could break bones. You blew up the children's section, Greg said quietly. The lead Kryn warrior raised his rifle. Drop your tools and surrender, human. We do not wish to. Greg triggered the plasma cutter. The superheated beam caught the warrior across the face. The Kryn scream was a high-pitched shriek that echoed off the metal walls. He fell backward into his squad. Then the engineering crew was on them. Not like soldiers. Like angry, desperate men with tools and rage. Danny shoved his welding torch into the gap in a warrior's armor. Chris swung his wrench and caved in an alien's skull. Greg kept cutting, the plasma beam slicing through exoskeleton and flesh. It was over in 30 seconds. 6 Kryn warriors dead. The engineering crew stood there, breathing hard, staring at what they'd done. Some of them looked sick. But Greg just checked his plasma cutter's power cell. There's more coming, he said. Find anything you can use as a weapon. We're not done yet. In the command center, Kyle was organizing his security teams. He put them at choke points throughout the station. Places where the corridors narrowed. Places where they could make the Kryn pay for every inch. He knew it wouldn't be enough. But maybe it would buy time for the evacuation. Sir, one of his officers said, we're getting reports from all over the station. The civilians are fighting back. What? Engineering crew took out a Kryn squad in Section 12. Maintenance workers are using their tools as weapons. Even some of the patients are helping defend the medical bays. Kyle felt something cold run down his spine. His people were fighting. His civilians. His non-combatants. They were supposed to evacuate, not fight. But they were fighting anyway. He grabbed the station-wide comm. This is Commander Morrison to all personnel. If you can evacuate, do it now. If you can't, then defend yourselves. Use anything you can find. Help is coming. He didn't know if help was really coming, but people needed hope. In Corridor 7, another Kryn breaching team was moving through. They'd learned from the first team. They were more careful now. They checked every corner. They moved slower. They came to a section where the corridor opened into a small atrium. Medical staff were trying to evacuate patients. 6 nurses and orderlies, moving people on stretchers toward the escape pods. Easy targets. The Kryn team leader raised his rifle. Stop, surrender, or we open fire. Dr. Linda Hayes was there. She'd been helping move a patient when the Kryn appeared. She looked at them, looked at her patients, looked at her nurses who were so young and so scared. She grabbed the stretcher's frame. It was heavy, made of metal and ceramics with wheels on the bottom. She lifted it, all of it, patient and frame together. Her muscles screamed. Her back felt like it was breaking. But she'd grown up on a farm in Iowa, and she'd been lifting heavy things her whole life. She threw it. 200 pounds of medical equipment and one very surprised patient flew through the air. It hit the Kryn team like a missile. Warriors fell. Rifles scattered. The patient, a Volnari who'd been unconscious, woke up very confused but alive. Linda didn't stop. She grabbed a metal IV stand, the kind that held bags of medicine. She gripped it like a spear and charged. The Kryn were still trying to get up when she drove the stand through the first warrior's chest. Right through the armor. The stand's metal point came out the alien's back. The nurses stared for 1 second. Then they grabbed whatever they could find and joined the fight. Medical trays. Chairs. One nurse had a bedpan and was hitting a Kryn warrior over and over with it, screaming the whole time. One warrior managed to aim his rifle at Linda. He fired. The plasma bolt hit her in the shoulder. It burned through her clothes, her skin, her muscle. The smell of cooked flesh filled the air. Linda screamed. She stumbled. The Kryn warrior clicked his mandibles. He thought he'd won. He started to aim for another shot. Linda looked at her shoulder, looked at the burned meat that used to be part of her, looked at the warrior who'd shot her. Her eyes went very cold, very calm. That really hurt, she said. She pulled the IV stand out of the dead warrior's chest. She walked toward the one who'd shot her. He fired again, but his hands were shaking now. He missed. She didn't. In the surgical suite, Nathan Pierce finished closing his patient. The miner would live. The surgery had been perfect despite the explosions and the alarms and the knowledge that death was walking through the station. Get him to recovery, Nathan told Jacob, then find somewhere safe. What about you? I'm going to see if anyone else needs help. Nathan pulled off his surgical gloves. He was exhausted. He'd been on his feet for 16 hours. His eyes burned. His hands ached. Then a Kryn breaching team burst through the surgical suite's doors. 20 warriors, all armed, all ready to kill. Nathan looked at them, looked at his patient on the table, looked at Jacob and the other surgical staff. Something changed in his face. Something old. Something that came from a time before hospitals and medicine, when humans were just another animal trying to survive. You attacked a hospital, he said quietly. The Kryn commander stepped forward. He was bigger than the others, with more armor and more decorations. Surrender, human. We may let you live if you... Nathan moved. He'd grown up in Colorado. His father had taken him hunting in the mountains when he was 10. He'd killed his first deer when he was 12. He hadn't hunted in 20 years. But his body remembered. He crossed the distance to the nearest warrior in 2 fast steps. He grabbed the alien's rifle, twisted it. The warrior's fingers broke trying to hold on. Nathan redirected the rifle and pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt went into the warrior's own squad. Then Nathan was firing. The rifle kicked against his shoulder. Aliens fell. The surgical suite filled with the smell of burning flesh and the screams of dying Kryn. Nathan's face was calm. His hands were steady. He aimed, he fired. He killed. Jacob stared for 1 second. Then he grabbed a surgical bone saw, the kind used for amputations. He turned it on. The high-speed blade screamed. He ran at a Kryn warrior and drove the saw into the alien's leg, through the armor, through the bone. The battle lasted 2 minutes. 20 Kryn entered. None of them left alive. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, the rifle in his hands, breathing hard. The surgical staff stood around him, covered in alien. The Kryn war queen sat on her command throne watching the tactical displays. The boarding operation should have been finished by now. Her warriors should have secured the station. Instead, the casualty reports kept coming in. Squad 7 eliminated. Squad 12, no response. Squad 19 requesting immediate medical evacuation. She clicked her mandibles in confusion. How were soft medical staff killing her trained warriors? The intelligence had said humans were peaceful. They ran hospitals. They saved lives. They weren't supposed to be dangerous. Send in more warriors, she ordered. Double the boarding teams. I want that station secured now. More pods launched from the Kryn ships. They attached to Mercy's Gate's hull. More cutting torches began their work. The War Queen would overwhelm the defenders with numbers. That always worked. On the station, Amy Cooper had gotten the 5 children from the pediatric ward to an escape pod. But the pod bay was under attack. Kryn warriors were trying to take it over. To stop the evacuation, Amy had put the children in the pod and sealed the door. Now she stood in front of that pod with a fire extinguisher in her hands. 3 Kryn warriors approached. They saw one small human woman. No armor, no weapon except a red metal canister. They laughed. Their mandibles clicked in amusement. "Move aside, human," one said. Amy looked at the pod behind her. She could hear the children inside crying, scared. They needed her. She'd been a nurse for 15 years. She'd held people's hands while they died. She'd brought babies into the world. She'd comforted the sick and the hurt and the scared. She was a healer. But she was also from Detroit. And Detroit had taught her how to handle herself. "Make me," she said. The lead warrior raised his rifle. Amy triggered the fire extinguisher. White foam sprayed into his face. He stumbled backward, blind. Amy swung the heavy metal canister like a baseball bat. It hit his helmet with a sound like a bell ringing. The warrior went down. The second warrior tried to grab her. Amy kicked him, right in what she hoped was somewhere sensitive. Alien anatomy, but pain was universal. He doubled over. She hit him with the extinguisher. Again. She kept hitting until he stopped moving. The third warrior actually managed to get his hands on her. He was strong. Much stronger than a human. He lifted her off the ground. His mandibles opened wide, ready to bite. Amy sprayed the foam directly into his mouth. He choked, gagged, dropped her. She rolled, came up with the extinguisher and swung one more time. The warrior fell. Amy stood there, breathing hard. Her uniform was torn. Her arms hurt. She was pretty sure she'd pulled something in her back. Behind her, the escape pod launched, carrying 5 frightened children to safety. She picked up the extinguisher and started toward the next pod bay. There were more children to save. In the main atrium, Kyle Morrison's security teams were making their stand. They'd set up barricades from tables and medical equipment. They had their 40 rifles and about 60 civilians who'd refused to evacuate. Maintenance workers, engineers, cooks, office staff, people who'd never fired a gun in their lives. But they were here anyway, holding whatever they could use as weapons. The Kryn came in waves, 10 warriors, then 20, then 30. They had military training. They moved in formation. They used cover. They were everything a professional fighting force should be. But Kyle's people weren't fighting like soldiers. When they ran out of ammunition, they threw their rifles and grabbed tools. When the Kryn tried to flank them, civilians popped out of ventilation shafts and attacked from behind. When the aliens used their superior firepower, the humans just scattered and reformed somewhere else. One security guard named Pete ran out of rifle charges. He dropped the gun, pulled out a combat knife, and charged a Kryn warrior. The alien was twice his size and armored. Pete didn't care. He jumped on the warrior's back and started stabbing, looking for gaps in the armor, finding them. A cook named Maria used her kitchen knives. She'd been preparing vegetables an hour ago. Now she was cutting Kryn warriors with the same tools. Every time they tried to advance through her section, she was there. A small woman with a big knife and absolutely no fear left. Greg Palmer led his engineering crew through the ventilation system. They'd figured out that they couldn't fight the Kryn head-on. So they didn't. They dropped from ceiling panels. They came through wall maintenance hatches. They appeared behind Kryn positions and attacked with plasma cutters and welding torches and heavy tools. It wasn't honorable combat. It wasn't fair. It was ambush and murder and everything that civilized warfare had tried to eliminate. But the Kryn had attacked a hospital. Fair had left the building. In the medical bay, Linda Hayes was still fighting despite the plasma burn on her shoulder. She'd wrapped it in bandages, taken some pain medication that was probably too strong, and gone back to defending her patients. 3 nurses fought beside her. They'd learned fast. Use anything heavy. Aim for the gaps in armor. Don't stop moving. A Kryn warrior got past their defense. He raised his rifle at a patient. Before he could fire, Linda threw a medical scanner at his head. He turned. She was already moving, grabbing another IV stand. She'd figured out these made good weapons. Long reach. Metal points, portable. The warrior fired. The plasma bolt went past her head so close she felt the heat. Linda kept coming. She drove the stand into the warrior's shoulder joint where the armor was weakest. He screamed. She twisted the stand and pulled it free. Hit him again, and again. When he finally fell, Linda was breathing hard. Her shoulder was bleeding through the bandages. She was pretty sure she was running on adrenaline and spite at this point, but there were still patients to protect. How many more? She asked one of her nurses. Sensors show at least 40 Kryn warriors still on the station. Linda picked up the warrior's rifle. She'd never used a Kryn weapon before. How hard could it be? Then we've got work to do. In a quiet corridor on Deck 5, Nathan Pierce was teaching a group of orderlies and technicians how to fight. They'd found him after his battle in the surgical suite. They'd seen what he'd done. Now they wanted to learn. Forget everything you know about fair fighting, Nathan told them. This isn't a boxing match. This is survival. Use anything you can find. If you see a weapon, take it. If you see a gap in their armor, go for it. Eyes, joints, anywhere that looks weak. A young technician raised his hand. But we're medical staff. We're supposed to save lives. Nathan looked at him with eyes that had seen too much in the last few hours. We are saving lives. Every Kryn we stop is more patients we protect. More civilians we evacuate. Sometimes saving lives means taking them. That's the choice they forced on us. An explosion echoed from somewhere above them. The station shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Nathan checked his stolen rifle's power cell. Still half full. Good. Stay together. Watch each other's backs. And remember, we didn't start this fight, but we're damn well going to finish it. Throughout the station, the humans were adapting. They learned the weak points in Kryn armor. They figured out that the aliens' exoskeletons made them strong but slow. They discovered that the Kryn were trained for traditional military operations, not guerrilla warfare in tight corridors. The aliens had numbers and weapons, but the humans had lived their entire lives on a world that wanted them dead. They'd learned to be creative. They'd learned to use whatever was available. They'd learned that when you couldn't win by strength, you won by being smarter, meaner, and more stubborn than your enemy. On the Kryn flagship, the War Queen watched her casualty reports climb. 50 warriors down, 70, 100. They'd killed some of the station's defenders, yes, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Her warriors were dying to kitchen knives and construction tools. Her elite boarding teams were being slaughtered by doctors and nurses and maintenance workers. What are these humans? She demanded. Her tactical officer pulled up files. According to our intelligence, humans come from a Class 12 death world. Everything on their planet is hostile. The weather patterns, the predators, the diseases, even their plants are poisonous. Why wasn't this in the original briefing? It was listed as irrelevant, my queen. They are medical staff. They chose peaceful professions. The War Queen felt something she rarely experienced. Fear. She'd assumed that beings who chose to heal would be weak. She'd forgotten a simple truth that every predator in the galaxy knew. The most dangerous prey was prey that knew how to kill but chose not to. Until you gave them a reason. Amy Cooper found another group of civilians trying to evacuate. They were trapped in a dead-end corridor with Kryn warriors blocking the only exit. She didn't have her fire extinguisher anymore. It had broken during her last fight, but she'd picked up a Kryn rifle. She'd watched how they used it. She thought she could figure it out. She stepped into the corridor. 10 Kryn warriors turned to look at her. One small, tired nurse with a rifle she barely knew how to use. I'm having a really bad day, Amy told them. And you're making it worse. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. Or I'm going to make you leave. Your choice. The lead warrior actually laughed. One human? You cannot stop us, Amy pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked hard. Her shot went wide. She adjusted. Fired again. This time she hit the warrior in the leg. He went down screaming. 6 hours into the battle, the Kryn War Queen received a report that made her mandibles click in distress. Her forces had secured exactly 0% of the medical station. Her casualties were now at 45%. 45%. Nearly half her boarding teams were dead or too injured to fight. And the reports from her surviving warriors were getting worse. One squad leader's final transmission had been just screaming. Another had sent a message that simply said, "They're in the walls. They're everywhere. They won't stop coming." A third had tried to describe how a human female had killed 5 of his warriors using nothing but medical instruments and rage. The War Queen pulled up video feeds from her warriors' helmet cameras. What she saw made her blood run cold. Humans weren't fighting like any species she'd encountered before. They didn't form proper battle lines. They didn't follow standard tactical doctrine. They appeared from nowhere, killed and disappeared before her warriors could respond. And they used everything. Kitchen knives, construction tools, medical equipment, even furniture. One camera showed a human male beating a Kryn warrior to death with a chair leg. Another showed a female using what looked like a cooking pot as a helmet and a metal tray as a shield. These weren't soldiers. These were civilians who'd decided that dying on their feet was better than living on their knees. And they were winning. On Mercy's Gate, Kyle Morrison was coordinating the defense from the damaged command center. Half his security teams were casualties. But the civilians had more than made up for it: engineers, cooks, office workers. Even some of the recovered patients had grabbed weapons and joined the fight. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we've cleared sectors 7 through 12. The Kryn are falling back to the docking bays. How many evacuees got out?" "About 60% of non-combatants are away. The rest are either fighting or can't be moved." Kyle nodded. Better than he'd hoped. "What's our casualty count?" The officer hesitated. 73 dead, 216 wounded. "But sir, the Kryn casualties are much higher. We estimate they've lost over 300 warriors." Kyle stared at the numbers. His people, his civilians, had killed over 300 trained alien soldiers. With improvised weapons and desperation, he didn't know whether to feel proud or sick. "Keep pushing," he said. "We're not done until every last one of them is off our station. Dead or running, I don't care which." In the medical bay, Linda Hayes was teaching other staff members how to use captured Kryn weapons. Her shoulder was still bleeding, but she'd stopped noticing the pain. There was too much to do, too many people to save. "The trigger is here," she explained to a group of nurses and orderlies. "The safety is this switch. Point away from yourself and pull. It's not complicated." A Volnari nurse looked uncomfortable. "We are healers." "This feels wrong." Linda understood. She'd felt the same way 3 hours ago. "Then go help with the wounded. Nobody's forcing you to fight. But if you stay here, you might have to defend yourself. Better to know how if that happens." The Volnari nurse took the rifle. Her hands shook, but she held it. More Kryn warriors tried to breach the medical bay. They came in force this time, 30 of them, a full assault team. They thought numbers would win. They burst through the doors with their weapons ready. Linda and her medical staff opened fire. They weren't good shots. Most of them had never held a gun before today. But there were enough of them, and the corridor was narrow. Plasma bolts filled the air. Kryn warriors fell. Some of the staff fell too, but they didn't retreat. They couldn't. There were patients behind them who couldn't run. The battle lasted 5 minutes. When it ended, 15 Kryn warriors were dead. The rest had pulled back. Linda's team had lost 4 people. 4 healers who died protecting their patients. Linda knelt beside one of them. A young human male named Chris who'd only been on the station for 2 months. He'd been studying to become a doctor. Now he never would. "I'm sorry," Linda whispered. "I'm so sorry." But there was no time for grief. More Kryn would come. They always came. So Linda stood up, reloaded her rifle, and got ready for the next fight. Nathan Pierce had gathered a group of about 20 humans. They'd cleared an entire section of the station, hunting down Kryn warriors like prey. Nathan had stopped thinking of himself as a doctor. Right now he was just a man from Colorado who knew how to hunt. They moved through corridors using hand signals. No talking, no noise. When they found Kryn warriors, they attacked from behind. Fast, brutal, efficient. They took the aliens' weapons and ammunition. They didn't take prisoners. One of Nathan's group was a maintenance worker named Steve. He'd been on the station for 10 years. He'd never hurt anyone in his life. Now he used a plasma cutter like it was an extension of his arm. He was good at killing. He didn't like that he was good at it. But he kept doing it anyway. They came to a section where Kryn warriors had taken hostages. 5 Thanari civilians, unarmed, terrified. The warriors were using them as shields, trying to negotiate safe passage off the station. Nathan studied the situation. The Thanari were directly in the line of fire. No clear shots. A normal military force would try to negotiate. Promise safe passage in exchange for hostages. Follow the rules of warfare. Nathan wasn't interested in the rules anymore. The Kryn had broken those rules when they attacked a hospital. He gestured to his team. They spread out, silent, patient. The Kryn leader was talking into his communicator, demanding extraction. He didn't notice the humans moving into position, didn't see Steve cutting through the floor panel below him, didn't hear Nathan climbing through the ventilation shaft above. When Nathan dropped from the ceiling onto the Kryn leader, it was already over. The alien didn't have time to scream. The rest of the humans hit the remaining warriors from 3 directions at once. The hostages dove for cover. Plasma bolts and blade weapons filled the air. 10 seconds later, the Kryn were dead. The Thanari were safe. Nathan's team had 1 casualty, a woman named Julie who'd taken a plasma bolt to the leg. They bound her wound and kept moving. There was no time to stop. Amy Cooper had cleared the escape pod bays and was now working her way toward the command center. She'd picked up more people along the way. Other nurses, some engineers, a cook who wielded kitchen knives with terrifying skill. They'd become a squad without meaning to. They ran into a major Kryn force in the main corridor. At least 40 warriors, fully armed, advancing in formation. Amy's group had maybe 15 people and a mix of weapons. By any reasonable military calculation, they should have retreated, should have found another route. But Amy was tired. She was hurt. She was so far past scared that she'd come out the other side into something cold and hard. She looked at the Kryn force, looked at her people, made a decision. "We hold this corridor," she said. "They want through, they go through us." They set up a barricade from whatever they could find. Overturned carts, broken furniture, medical equipment. It wouldn't stop plasma bolts, but it gave them cover. They spread out, checked their weapons, waited. The Kryn came forward. Their commander called out demands in their clicking language. Amy didn't speak it, but she could guess. Surrender or die. The usual threats. She fired first. Her shot hit the commander in the chest. He fell, then everyone was firing. Both sides. The corridor became a wall of plasma and smoke and screaming. Amy's people used their cover, shot, ducked, moved, shot again. The Kryn had more weapons, better armor, professional training. But they were in a narrow corridor with no room to use their numbers. And the humans weren't trying to win in traditional terms. They were just trying to make the Kryn pay for every inch. The battle went on. Minutes felt like hours. People fell on both sides. Amy took a plasma bolt to the arm. It burned. She ignored it. Kept firing. The cook ran out of ammunition and charged with her knives. An engineer rigged a plasma cutter to explode and threw it into the Kryn formation. Slowly, impossibly, the Kryn advance stopped. Then it started falling back. The aliens had numbers and weapons and training, but they didn't have the sheer stubborn refusal to quit that humans had learned from living on a planet that tried to kill them daily. The Kryn retreated. Amy's group stood in the corridor, surrounded by bodies, barely able to breathe from the smoke. They'd held. Against 40 trained warriors, 15 civilians had held the line. Greg Palmer and his engineering crew were doing something crazy. They'd figured out that the Kryn ships outside were coordinating the boarding teams. So they decided to cut that coordination. They were currently outside the station, in spacesuits, climbing across the hull toward a Kryn boarding pod that was still attached. It was insane. They could get shot by the Kryn ships. They could get sucked into space if their suits failed. They could die a dozen different ways. But they were engineers. They solved problems. And the Kryn were a problem. They reached the pod. Greg pulled out his plasma cutter, began working on the pod's hull. The metal was tough, but he was patient. He cut through. They climbed inside. The pod was empty except for 2 Kryn warriors monitoring communications. They looked up in surprise as humans in spacesuits appeared from a hole in their floor. They barely had time to reach for weapons before Greg's crew was on them. The last Kryn boarding pod detached from Mercy's Gate 12 hours after the attack began. It fired its engines and fled toward the waiting fleet like a scared animal running from a predator. Behind it, the medical station hung in space, damaged and burning but still intact. Still alive, Kyle Morrison stood in what was left of the command center and watched the Kryn fleet jump to faster than light speed. They were running. The mighty Kryn collective, feared across a dozen systems, was running from a hospital station defended by doctors and nurses and engineers. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he just felt tired and old and sad. His station was a mess. His people were dead or wounded. Everything they'd built over 15 years had been damaged or destroyed. And for what? Because some alien war queen wanted revenge and thought a hospital would be an easy target. "Get me casualty reports," he said quietly. "And damage assessments. then start organizing rescue teams for anyone trapped in damaged sections. His tactical officer nodded and got to work. Kyle sat down in his chair and put his head in his hands. He'd been station commander for 3 years. In that time, they'd never fired a weapon at anyone. Now his station was covered in bodies and blood. He didn't know how to process that. In the medical bay, Linda Hayes was treating wounded. There were so many wounded. Her staff had set up triage areas throughout the station. Red tags for critical, yellow for serious, green for minor, black for those they couldn't save. Too many black tags. Too many people who'd been alive this morning and were gone now. Staff members she'd worked with for years. Patients who'd come here to heal and instead found violence. All because the Kryn couldn't tell the difference between a military target and a place of healing. Linda's shoulder was properly bandaged now. Another doctor had insisted, threatening to sedate her if she didn't sit still for treatment. The plasma burn was bad. It would scar. She didn't care. Scars meant you survived. She could live with that. A young nurse named Katie approached. She looked shell-shocked. Dr. Hayes, we've got survivors in the collapsed section of Deck 7. They're trapped. We can't get to them with normal equipment. Linda stood up, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. Get the engineering crews. We'll cut through if we have to. Nobody else dies today if I can help it. Nathan Pierce found himself in what used to be his surgical suite. It was destroyed. Equipment smashed. Walls scorched from plasma fire. Blood everywhere. Some of it was Kryn, some was human. He couldn't tell which was which anymore, and he wasn't sure he cared. He'd killed 23 beings today. He'd counted. 23 lives that he'd taken with his own hands. He was a surgeon. His job was to save lives, to put people back together. Instead, he'd spent 12 hours taking them apart. Jacob found him there. The nurse looked as exhausted as Nathan felt. Doc, they need you in Medical Bay 3. We've got critical patients. I don't think I can, Nathan said quietly. Jacob, I killed people today. How do I go back to healing after that? Jacob sat down next to him in the wreckage. You do it because they need you. Those patients didn't attack anyone. They're just hurt and scared and they need a doctor. So you be their doctor. You save them, and you deal with the rest later. Nathan looked at his hands. They were steady. Always steady, even when the world was falling apart. Maybe Jacob was right. Maybe he could compartmentalize. Kill in one room, heal in another. That sounded insane. But this whole day had been insane. He stood up. Okay, let's go save some lives. Amy Cooper was in the pediatric ward checking on the children who'd been evacuated and then brought back after the fighting stopped. They were scared. Some were crying. All of them had seen and heard things that no child should experience. A little human girl named Sophie held her hand tightly. Miss Amy, are the bad aliens gone? Yes, sweetheart. They're gone. You're safe now. Did you stop them? Did you make them go away? Amy thought about the Kryn warriors she'd killed. The bodies in the corridors. The blood on her hands that had taken 20 minutes to scrub off. Yes, me and a lot of other people. We made them go away. Thank you, Sophie whispered. Amy felt something break inside her chest. She'd killed to protect these children. She'd turned herself into a weapon to keep them safe. And she'd do it again if she had to. That realization was both comforting and terrifying. Greg Palmer and his crew were working on emergency repairs. The station had holes in its hull. Atmosphere was leaking. Power systems were damaged. They had maybe 48 hours before the whole station fell apart completely. We need to patch the hull breaches first, Greg told his team. Then work on life support. Then power. Everything else can wait. They worked through exhaustion, welding metal plates over holes, sealing damaged sections, rerouting power around destroyed conduits. It was hard, dangerous work. But it kept them busy, kept them from thinking about what they'd done. One of Greg's crew, a young woman named Lisa, stopped working and just stared at her plasma cutter. I killed 6 of them with this. 6 living beings. I keep seeing their faces. Greg didn't have good words for that. He felt the same way. We did what we had to do. They attacked us. They gave us no choice. Does that make it okay? No, but it makes it necessary. There's a difference. The Galactic News Services picked up the story within hours. A Kryn war fleet attacked a medical station. The station survived. The Kryn fled with massive casualties. It spread across the galaxy like wildfire. 3 days after the attack, the Galactic Council arrived with supply ships and investigators. They brought food, Medicine, repair equipment, and thousands of questions. The lead investigator was a Volnari diplomat named Teksha. He'd been in the business of investigating conflicts for 30 years. He'd seen wars, battles, massacres, but this was different. He walked through the damaged corridors of Mercy's Gate and reviewed the security footage. Watched medical staff fighting with improvised weapons. Watched civilians defending patients. Watched humans turn from healers into warriors and then back to healers again. He met with Kyle Morrison in the temporary command center. "Commander, I need to understand what happened here. The Kryn Collective is claiming that your station was a legitimate military target, that you had hidden weapons and trained soldiers." Kyle laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Investigator, take a look around. Do you see any military weapons? Any soldiers? We had 40 security guards with basic rifles. Everything else was civilian staff defending themselves with whatever they could find. Yet you repelled a military assault that should have overwhelmed you in minutes." "Yes." "How?" Kyle thought about that. How did you explain Earth to someone who'd never been there? How did you describe what it meant to evolve on a world where everything tried to kill you, where the weather could end you, where the animals hunted you, where even the plants were poisonous? "We're from a dangerous planet," Kyle finally said. "Everything on Earth is a threat. The animals, the diseases, the climate. We spent millions of years learning how to survive that. We learned to use tools, to think creatively, to keep fighting even when we were hurt and scared and dying. That's in our DNA now. We're peaceful most of the time. We choose to be. But when you threaten us, when you threaten the people we're trying to protect, all that survival instinct comes back." The Kryn learned that the hard way. Teksha clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "The Kryn are preparing to file a formal complaint. They claim your people used barbaric tactics, ambushes, improvised weapons. They say it violated the rules of civilized warfare. They attacked a hospital," Kyle said flatly. "They gave up any right to complain about fairness when they fired on a medical station." The investigator couldn't argue with that. The footage was clear. The Kryn had fired first. They'd targeted civilian areas. They'd killed patients in their beds. By any reasonable interpretation of galactic law, Mercy's Gate had acted in self-defense. "I will include that in my report," Teksha said, "along with a recommendation that the Kryn Collective pay full reparations for damages and apologize formally." Will they? They will if they want to avoid having every major power in the galaxy condemn them. Nobody wants to be known as the species that attacks hospitals. Over the following weeks, repair crews from a dozen worlds arrived to help rebuild Mercy's Gate. The Kryn Collective, facing universal condemnation, paid for all repairs and sent a formal apology. Their war queen was removed from power. The entire fleet that had attacked the station was disbanded. But the damage to the people couldn't be repaired so easily. Linda Hayes went back to healing, but she had nightmares. Nathan Pierce still performed surgeries with perfect precision, but his hands would sometimes shake when he was alone. Amy Cooper continued nursing, but she kept a weapon hidden in her station in case it happened again. Kyle Morrison commanded his rebuilt station, but he'd lost the easy peace he'd once felt. Greg Palmer installed new defense systems throughout the station. Real ones this time. Weapons that could actually stop a military assault. Nobody complained. Everyone understood that hope for peace was good, but preparation for war was necessary. The non-human staff members looked at their human colleagues differently now. With respect, yes, but also with a kind of nervous awareness. They'd seen what humans could become when threatened.